Hi, everybody. My name is Kamal Khalil, and this is my final for Curriculum 354. So let's get started. So to begin with, let's go ahead and state the two different types of assessments. We have formative assessments and we have summative assessments. Okay, we are going to actually take a dive into both of those. Summative assessments. I'm starting with summative assessment because summative assessment is assessment to where it's for pretty much at the end, given at the end of a chapter or a unit, or ultimately the end of a year for SBAC or for state testing, depending on where you're from and where you're at. They should match materials taught, should align with instructions. They're used for grades, and they can reflect UDL, although SBAC does not reflect UDL. But yours can reflect UDL because UDL, ultimately, we are more interested if the child retained the knowledge or not. But summative assessments, they are the end. They are not for adjusting instructions, but instructions are driven by summative assessment because you need to teach what's going to be assessed. And if students are seeing new content during an assessment, then there is major issues. Okay. Chapter test. Chapter test is one of those interesting ones where it can actually tie into a formative assessment, which is what we're going to talk about next. But you can a chapter test, if students do not do too well on a chapter test, can actually turn into a formative assessment. And we will go over that at the end. But formative assessments, they are real-time instructions adjustment. They should be doing all the time. A formative assessment could be as simple as teacher observing students' reactions towards an instruction or towards an activity. It's questioning, it's checking for understanding. Good way for checking understanding is popsicle sticks or random selection. Other types of formative assessments are class or group discussions, structured collaborations such as Keegan strategies, sharing of work with whiteboards, or allowing a student to share their screen, poll questions, quizzes, exit tickets. I like using also chats. Exit tickets, I think, are pretty are really cool because they give you an idea of whether or not you need to go back and reteach a certain content or topic. Quizzes give you valuable data to keep adjusting and driving your instruction. Again, formative assessment is assessments we give during instructions. Okay, peer and self-review. I have this in bold because this is also very important. And remember what I talked about, the end of chapter test. How about if a whole class in general does not do well on a peer on a chapter test? Well, that's when we could take that summative assessment, turn it into a formative assessment, and have students do peer or self-review on that. And let's actually dive into more in peer and self-review. Okay, so students, if they're going to be asked to be given a peer self-review, they should be given a rubric. Okay, different types of peer and self-review. There's checklists, there's reflections. In fact, these are my two favorite ones, checklists and reflections, because a checklist allows a student to see what is there and what is missing. And so it puts the onus on the student to actually see where they are strong and where they need to work on. And reflection is actually my favorite type of instruction. And this is where it ties into the end of chapter or unit test, because I always do reflection assessments at the end of chapter test or unit test. Students get to see where they succeeded, but more importantly, they get to see where they need work, where they did not succeed, and they need to solve that problem themselves. It puts the onus of learning back into the student's lap. They need to fix their mistakes and explain how they made that mistake. And it's very important that they do this because it allows them to critically think and problem solve about what they need to fix and what they need to learn. So self-assessments and peer self and peer assessments are very important. Also big fan of peer assessments. All these could be done with peers. Students can relate more with each other than they can with their teachers. So they tend to learn more and easier from their peers. Hence the word peer pressure. Okay, let's keep going. When, why, and how for assessments. So let's start off with formative assessments. Formative assessment is, again, let me state this, is assessment for learning. It's given on the fly, okay? It is not spontaneous and it's not random, but it's done all the time, okay? It can be planned, it's used during instructions, it's also used to adjust instructions, okay? And it's also good for when there's it's also good for finding out any misconceptions and addressing those misconceptions. So formative assessment is during instruction, okay? Summative assessment is end all. Usually it's the end of chapter test, can be one like we stated earlier. It's also the SBAC at the end of the year, where it's used to check mastery of standards, okay? Especially with SBAC, it's like once it's done, it's done. So, I mean, there's no real instructions to fix that afterwards, although you can, it's just not going to reflect on the report card, because ultimately summative assessments do reflect on the report card. And let us keep going. Now we're going to talk about rubrics. So there's two different types of rubrics, and rubrics are very important. Rubrics should be done. Rubrics should be completed. Actually, when assigning or when designing assessments, you should actually design a rubric before designing an assessment, because rubric gives direction. Rubric also gives clarity for teachers and for students, both in general. So the two different types of rubrics, we have a holistic rubric, which is a more broad rubric. It's not very recommended to do those, especially if you're going to do those for SBAC, or not SBAC, for TPAs and stuff like that. But you would want to use those for more kind of informal. They're not very specific. They're easy to make, but they don't really give very good feedback. They're just more broad and general. They tend to be kind of ambiguous. The better type of rubric are analytical rubrics. Analytical rubrics are more broken up. Okay, they're under different analytical rubrics have. Oh, by the way, the holistic rubrics has a criteria and a scale. That's it. Okay, so the criteria is stated in the scale. The difference is analytical rubrics give you descriptors, okay? And they break down the criteria more. There are more criteria. In a holistic, there's only one criteria. In an analytical, there is multiple criteria. And it gives you better feedback, and it gives you better guidance. And so let's go over the different parts of actually the analytical. What you have right here is the criteria, okay? What is being assessed in what is being assessed in with this rubric? Okay, at the very top you have the score or the performance level. I mean, how are you going to score it? Is it going to be just done like via does not meet, meets, or exceeds? Or is it going to be 1, 2, or 3 different types? Is there a right or wrong answer? No. And in the middle is where all the meat is. It's the descriptors. It tells you what it takes to get that score. Okay. And so they should be clear, they should be easy to read, and they should be age appropriate. You don't want, you don't want to give a fourth grade rubric to kindergarten. Okay. And you don't want to give a fourth grade rubric to a high school student. It has to be age appropriate. Okay. It should meet the needs of the student and the assignment. Okay. Again, one of the most important parts are the descriptors or the indicators. They need to be clear. They should not be ambiguous, because that is one of the downsides of the holistic. Okay. It needs to be clear, and it needs to give good guidance, and it needs to actually allow the students to know what they need to do to be successful. Okay. So how to design a rubric? Well, you need to have your goals defined. Okay. Do not create a rubric without knowing your goals, because guess what? The rubric is measuring your goals, right? So you need to choose a rubric type, whether it's going to be holistic for more of a broad rubric, or an analytical for more of, I would say, beneficial and exact rubric, far more useful to the students and for learning. You need to determine the criteria because both rubrics have criteria. What's going to be measured? Okay, what's going to be measured? You need to create, as far as for the analytical, you need to create the top part. What is measured? How is it going to be scored? And you need to be and then finally you want to write the descriptors where it's going to indicate what it means to be successful. Okay, this is going to tell you right here. This is going to show you if you do this, you'll get this score, and it needs to be clearly stated and defined. Okay, and obviously you don't want to put out a rubric without revising it and reading it out. So make sure that you revise and read your rubric. Okay, and also a very important part of a rubric that is actually often gone unnoticed. It's found on the very top. It's called essential question. Okay, you need to have an essential question because that also guides the guides for the assignment. It lets the student know this is what I want you to learn, and this rubric is going to tell you this is the score you will get when you learn it, or if you learn this much. Okay, so let us continue. By the way, whenever possible, always do analytical. Don't leave it up to chance. Always do analytical. They're easier. It's better for the students, I should say. It may not be easier to construct, but it's more beneficial and it's clear instructions. Okay, and it allows students to form their goals clear, and it gives them better instructions to reach their goals. And finally, it's time for my reflection. So I would say coming into this class, I was pretty confident about assessments, but after the first couple of classes, I had to say that it was only the tip of the iceberg. The weakest part for me was the rubric, and that is where I made the biggest gain in this classroom. I did not know the parts of a rubric. I did not know how to create a rubric. All I knew how to do was read a rubric. But this class did an excellent job of showing me how to create a rubric and how to and the steps going about it, and how it should align with your goals and how it should align with your essential question and everything like that. So I think I benefited very greatly from this class. I received more clarity as far as assessments is concerned for formative. I had a good grasp of summative, but I had more clarity for formative assessments and what that entails. And then I also, in addition, like I said before, the rubric portion I think was my biggest gainer in this class. I mean, I feel pretty confident now in creating my own rubrics, and fairly quickly too. As long as I have my objectives and I have my essential question ready to go, I'm fairly confident in creating a rubric that aligns with standards and the task at hand that I want the students to make. If I had to say at the beginning of this class, looking hindsight, I would say I was a 1 on a rubric that is scored from 1 through 4. And I would say now on a rubric of 1 to 4, I am definitely a 4. So I would like to encourage my classmates and my instructor to give me a 4 on this assignment. Thank you very much.